Sure.
Hi everyone.
The audio is good, huh?
Yeah, hi friends. So we're back here with Mr. Eden Liew, and since we last spoke about 3 to 4 weeks ago, I've got quite many feedback, and your videos have gone. My channel is not the objective. And my objective is not for followers, thumbs up. That's not, because I think we are mature enough to know that our views and just make it's just valuable. It's out there. It's gonna be for time immortality. Someone is going to pick it up. But I think the people who view our videos are the right people. It's a very niche group of people, and I think it has landed in the right laptops and the right handphones. That I'm really happy to say. Yeah, and one of the feedback for you is that I've got some students in Iran, not my direct students, but just general students in Iran.
Right.
They are supposed to come to Singapore for exchange program. I'm actually one of the volunteer counselors of NTU in the past. So I'm in contact with certain of these PhD students, exchange students, undergrads. And he says that these videos mean a lot to him. And in Iran, it's almost like North Korea. And when you ask them to say certain things, everybody just shut their mouth. I think it's more like Singapore 10 years ago. Time historical. Singapore is a place where people are just, you have self-censorship. We still do have self-censorship. But I think it's more like self-moderation, I call it. People know what to say, and there are lots of very sensitive things that we have to be very careful of, because we're living in a place where our neighbors are so close. My neighbors are immigrant Indians, immigrant Malaysians. We have to be very, very sensitive to people's feelings. So, I think the word is not self-censorship in Singapore, but self-responsibility. There's so much trolls, hatred, negative talk in comments all over the world, and I subscribe to a lot of channels internationally. People will just shoot behind a mask. I'm very careful not to give out to be part of this talk of hate. It's very, very important that we also educate our young people. I mean, anyone that when you are posting something up, you're promoting something. You could be promoting a video of hate without yourself knowing. There are people who do that. I think young people who do that. And I feel I'm still young, and you're still young. People like 77 years old, Joe Biden, they're running for election. Some of the candidates that are 80 years old, they're running. To them, life is so precious. They're not going to waste any one day of their lives. They think they can make a difference. They do that. So, Eden, I value our conversation. I really deeply appreciate that, because there are so few people who are willing to want to just say something that's honest and yet respectable. The choices of words, the tonality, how you bring across can be very respectful. So I feel that our viewers are the right viewers, and something positive. I've got Iran students, and I told them that, hey, some of these videos, you can send it to your Iran Telegram group for them, to encourage them, to tell them that, hey, this part of the world, these are the things we're discussing. We're full of hope. We're in the middle of change. We are going forth to the next, the next lap, the post-pandemic lap, and people are looking forward to change. So this is one of the positive things, and also I think your talk has been very honest. I think people picked it up in terms of your thoughts on the education aspect. It's been really, really positive. So I want to thank you once again. So today's talk, Eden, is on the post-pandemic world, and just to give the viewers a backdrop or background, I thought that this is such an apt time for us to talk about this topic, because Singapore just had an election. Politics aside, you know, we have a new minister for environment, minister for education,
That's right.
Minister Lawrence Wong. Someone I think I can respect because he has a very consultative approach, and we have to know that no one has all the answers. You know, when we elect someone up there, we don't. In this era, we don't expect people to have answers from A to Z. It's impossible. I mean, only God knows that. I think we are wise enough to know that we place our hope on a higher power and not on human. So, you know, someone like him is very consultative. He actually is someone that I respect, even though he's in his 40s. You know, whatever conversation we have, if you picked up positively, I'm glad. And if it's taken as just as a backdrop, I'm also happy that we are sharing this. So, okay, the background is this. In US, you know, New York is actually one of the hotspots of the pandemic. They've since controlled it. It's one of the states has a lower level of positive cases now. They're re-evaluating the next lap of the city, reimagining the city and reimagining New York. So the New York governor has actually brought on Bill Gates and the chairman of Google to actually reimagine the future. So today, I'd like to throw this question to you. So this is what he says. When does change come to a society? Because we all talk about change and advancement, but really, like we can control it. But really, we are just always status quo. It's hard to change the status quo. When you get moments in history when people say, okay, I'm ready for change, I get it. I think this is one of those moments. And I think education, as well as other topics, a topic where people say, look, I've been reflecting, I've been thinking, I've learned a lot. It's about time. Well said. So, Eden, I really want to hear from you, the post-pandemic world. Hopefully it comes soon and comes safely. What's your vision? No matter, however, whatever. Tell us your nuggets of thoughts that have gone through the post-pandemic world in the aspect of education in Singapore or even in the world.
I don't think we should talk about post-pandemic world. Let's talk about a bit about the pandemic world. Currently, we see a lot of changes happening. That means, I mean, I'm working in the church, although I'm no longer working in education. I've seen quite a bit of change that happens in the church. Say, there's church setting. You know, worship service now is online, which nobody had been thinking about it. You know, traditionally, a worshipper will go into a sanctuary and, you know, attend the service. But now, because of the pandemic situation, you know, everything goes online. And I'm very sure, although I'm not that close to the current education sector, I'm very sure that a lot of things have already gone online. And it's a very, very big change, a very big shift in the thinking of teachers, you know, big shift in thinkings of the principals or the leaders of the schools. I think it has happened, and suddenly leaders and teachers begin to realize that this is a possibility. In fact, the technology of video conferencing is there all the time. You know, it was not invented during the pandemic season. It was invented maybe 10, 20, 30 years ago. No, 20, maybe, I won't say 30, but probably in the age of 10, 20 years ago, we should be able to do these things. But nobody is using it. Now the big question is, you have used it? It is possible. What can we do post-pandemic? And at least during the pandemic, it has broken that sacrosanct sort of idea that the teacher must stand on a stage, you know, stage on stage kind of situation, stand on a stage and with a live audience. But in reality is that he don't need to stand on the stage. In fact, we can get the best teacher on the stage and put it across in video, and then use the technology of interaction between the teacher and the student more meaningfully in terms of interactions and so on and so forth. So I think the future, there is a possibility in the future post-pandemic that we can really leverage on technology to help us to make education more meaningful, more useful for the students. It's a question, the technology is there, it's a question of how to use it. And this happened 20 years ago when we started the Republic Polytechnic. We asked ourselves the question, why are we still handing out handouts, giving material, getting feedback from the students, whether it's an examination or whether it's a paper, a discussion paper.
So
manually.
You are a person ahead of your time.
Well, it's not ahead of our time. It is using the technology that's available, and that we should be thinking along those technology and how technology can help us. Unless we break this so-called cycle where people are afraid of technology, are fearful that it can create problem and so on and so forth, or it creates problem to especially at the teachers level. I think the students can adapt quite quickly, but not the teachers. Sadly speaking, it's the teachers who says, I'm a bit embarrassed to be on on the screen. I'm we can't interact with the students properly.
I can attest to that.
So we have we have sort of avoided, or not say avoided, we have missed out a situation where we can really make education better. I'll give an example of the entertainment world. Traditionally, it is always a few people on the stage and a live audience, right? And then cinema come along, right? And in one, now the actor, instead of acting for a live audience of 500 or 1,000,
that's right.
Now he can act for millions and billions. Not say billions, but tens of millions, hundreds of millions. It's a complete change, and obviously they earn lots more, because instead of acting, on a regular basis every night, at the theater, to 500, 1,000 audience, now they are acting for millions. So we should leverage, we should change the way we are doing things in education. Here, I'm just talking about just the simple fact that we are now thinking in terms of the, stage on stage kind of situation, to stage on movie theater or whatever you want. But there's also the other part of it. We are collecting a lot of information from the students. How are we collecting it? Again, the IT technology can really help us to collect a lot of information about students, in the classroom now, because we can ask the question and get immediate answers, and we should be able to monitor all these answers. We can track how the answer is coming back to us and what are the responses. And there's so much we can do with the technology that is helping industries to create bigger, better items. But yet in education, we still use the same technology that maybe 100 years ago, 200 years ago, the classroom, the teacher, examination paper. It's very sad, yeah. And I really, really hope that something will change after the pandemic. Yeah.
I agree with you that absolutely that the students have no problem with technology. It is the teachers. I think we hit the nail on the head. You know, in this, if you look at my channel, which I think you've got very little time, I actually interviewed some international students, Egypt, East Malaysia from Sabah, Indian girl from India, Indian boy, and China boy from China. And all of them are in their 20s, and another 30-year-old PhD exchange fellowship researcher from China, from Shanghai, 交通大学. It's awkward, and many more who doesn't want to be recorded on YouTube because they come from a country whereby there's always a fear in speaking up. I mean, in Asia. So, but these few students, when I speak to them, most of them, they are open. Millennials are open to speaking up. So the fundamental discussion I have with them is about, the future. What do they see in the future? Because policymakers can't see into the future, right? Not too far. But these students can see into the future because they say their parents' time, this Asia has come up from poverty. So their parents' time, they tell the stories about their lives. Zi Jing from China, he says that he stayed in a one-room apartment whereby during the Chinese New Year, the relatives come and there are 10 of them. And in the middle of the night, if they need to go to toilet, everyone who sleeps on the floor must get up and go out. But he juxtaposed his time and the era now. He got a scholarship in Singapore. He's filled with hope. He says that changes are going to be big. That's what he said. Another Indian student, he told me his dad had to walk 6 miles to go to school every day. Another 6 miles back. And the dad is a very famous, renowned doctor now in India. And he talks about he grows up now, different from his dad. In a world of technology, he can see big changes. He says the world is going to be just technology. This is the eyes that they are looking into the future. That people like us, because we are brought up, our blueprint is still that blueprint that we're being brought up. So for us to unscramble that blueprint, that disk, we need to break it and then have a new disk uploaded. So I think you're right to say that teachers are the ones having the problem. I think bureaucrats are the one having the problem. You need technocrats, visionary, who's going to bring us this lab. And like what I said, to quote the governor, Andrew Cuomo, he said that everyone says it's time to change, but it's always a status quo. But I think now we have to change because we are hit between our eyes. And you're right to say that, I totally agree with you. In those days, theater was in a theater. I never thought of that. But now theater is in the cinemas and theater is in Netflix. And I could watch the movie on my Netflix, and every night we're watching on the headphone, $20 per month, that we can watch all the shows in the world. Past release and all this. Something that we couldn't envisage even like 10, 20 years ago. Is there further thoughts that you have? While we are really like now, this train is really just accelerating forward. Is there anything we have to hold on to while this train is moving forward, Eden?
I think the challenge is I'm most worried is that we'll spring back to the old ways once the pandemic is over.
True.
And I think this is something that I think that the ministry, the leaders of education should really think about and says, how can we leverage on this window? Because windows are very small. People develop habits, and they say, oh, this habit's fine, it's doable. But the minute the pandemic's over, they go back to the old habits and says, okay, everybody back to class and back to the old situation where there will be face-to-face interaction. I'm not against face-to-face, and I think we should have face-to-face interaction. There should be interaction between fellow students. There should be interaction. In fact, I always tell the some of my colleagues, I said, look, actually they don't learn very much from you, as teacher, but actually they learn a lot of things from each other, because they say, hey, what did the teacher say, and then somehow figure this out amongst themselves, rather than they sort of memorize what the teacher has said all throughout. So how do we make sure that we can take this opportunity to say we have done certain things during this pandemic period and move it into the so-called post-pandemic period? The other thing that always bugs people, which I think Singapore is not in that situation, is they talk about digital divide. And that's the reason why I push very hard in Republic Poly to have everybody a laptop. Because that's where I can say, which family don't have a laptop? This is where I have an opportunity to ask this question, that some families don't have laptops, and they will be the one that is going to be left behind in this digital world. Because when they grow to 20, 30, they'll be far, far behind my children. Because my children have laptops, my children have devices, but some families, children don't have devices. So trying to use technology in the school is not just for the sake of communication. That means the teacher to students, students to teachers communication, but it's also for a chance to leverage up the situation where the poor versus the less endowed versus the very well endowed. The gap can be shortened, because we must make sure that they have a head start. At least the poorer people have enough head start to be in this Google world where everything they want to find is is on the phone, to be able to say logged in to register for some programs, free programs on the internet. Otherwise, we have another generation of students that goes through and become adults who is not as well equipped as those who have plenty of machines, plenty of technology at home. And that is the part that we really, at the school level, we must resolve this, just using the technology to help us to even out the discrepancy between the so-called rich and richly endowed, the IT, and the so-called the digital divide between the rich and the poor. Yeah.
And I totally agree with you, because there was a latest article that talked about this pandemic actually divided the poor and the rich even wider. It impacted certain groups of people even more. And also because, capitalism is about equal opportunities, and let the race begin, and not equal outcomes, which is communism or socialism. And I think us being in a capitalistic country, and that capitalism actually brought a lot of people out of poverty, like for example in China. And I think you're right that giving students that head start, even in a very small microcosm of Singapore, which we only have about 5 million local born Singaporeans, plus immigrants about another 2 million, plus minus that.
3.5 and 2 million, sorry. That should be about 5.5 million here in Singapore now. Yeah.
Then that huge discrepancy. For example, like in a huge country like in India, in China, whereby they've got 1.4, 1.5 billion people, the huge discrepancy between the poor and the rich is so huge. The big, huge divide, and that's going to even part even bigger. So those people who are really talented, they could come from the village, like just like in the microcosm in Singapore. Those are really talented. They could come from I should say families which need a particular support to go up if they want to compete on level ground, so that no child is left behind. I actually come from a single mom family, because my dad passed when I was 7 from a liver cancer. So, we actually did struggle a lot when we were young. And that made the spirit that, you really wanted to work really hard to pay it forward for your family. and actually to really do so much more. And you know, people from that kind of background, they could show the kind of hunger, and they could show the kind of desire, hunger, and the kind of that kind of, I should say, the inertia, you know, that they really want to grow and give back and to put the past behind them and move forward. And I think giving a child or students in that kind of disadvantaged playing on that disadvantaged playing field, something, I think you have brought up a very important point. And I want to ask, like, when you were doing PBL in Republic Poly, there are no textbooks, and it was a controversial time that people have to accept that. Was it difficult? Was there resistance to change?
Yes, I think I mentioned this before in your program. That of course there will be educator who says, you know, well, you didn't pack in, you know, the 2 volumes of physics into your curriculum, because in PBL mode we try to extract it from them. That means they try to read it from the one. Whereas compared to the efficiency of having somebody who rattle off chapter 1 followed by chapter 2, chapter 3 and 4, and so on and so forth, it's so much efficient. Whereas you're trying to extract out the concept from them. But I think the PBL, how do you call it, philosophy is that concept which we extract out will be deeply embedded in him or her, you know, as versus just a lot of knowledge that you memorize for the season and then regurgitate during the examination, and that's it. Whereas if in the PBL mode, the concept was that if the person think about it, think through the concept, he will really remember those important concepts that he has picked up, you know, along the way. So there will be controversy because our system is built on having a lot of information, right? The JC will work on the O-level information, you know, and build on it, and then the university will build on the JC information and build on it. So there are educators who have expressed concern in this approach. But I do see that PBL approach also have other, as I mentioned before, there are other benefits. They are better at communication skill, thinking through issue skills, and many other things.
And I understand you're actually reading a lot on Confucianism these days. Is there anything that you have any enlightenment from that? I actually came from a Chinese school. I came from a SAP school, yeah, but not so much in depth in Confucianism.
I mean, Confucius is said to be a very good teacher. And one of the points that's always mentioned is Confucius. If you ask, you know, there's always this topic called, somebody will come and ask, what is ren? That means what is, you know, kindness, you know, and Confucius will always give different answers to different people. It's unlike the typical Western type of education where, you know, somebody put a definition and he's a great teacher, and then that definition becomes like, you know, the ultimate truth. Whereas in the Confucius way of education, which I thought was in a way good, in the sense that he looks at this person's, if the person is too